Alright, so today we're looking at part two of this lecture and the war at home for the United States in World War One. Alright, so the entire US economy is going to be focused on the war effort. We're going to see it shift from a consumer to a war economy, so this requires cooperation between the business and the government. But yet, in the process, the power of the US government is going to expand, so the Congress is going to give President Wilson direct control over the economy. And so he's going to help establish the War Industries Board, which encouraged companies to use mass production techniques. And under the WIB, we're going to see production and wages increase 20%. During this time, union membership actually doubles almost, from about 2.5 to 4 million. And to deal with disputes management between management and labor, Wilson also creates the National War Labor Board in 1918. To help conserve food, Wilson is going to set up the Food Administration, the FA. He declares one day a week meatless and another week sweetless. And then 2 days a week it might be wheatless. So a lot of homeowners began planting victory gardens in their yards, which will allow them to grow their own food. And basically their entire front yard, as small as it can be, is turned into a garden so they can grow their own food. And school children will be seen working after school growing their own tomatoes and cucumbers, even in public parks. We're going to see farmers increase their production by almost 40% by adding more land for farmland to help fight back the food crisis. So to sell the war, the U.S. is going to have two tasks. They got to raise the money and convince the public to support it, which is very difficult. How are you going to convince the people to support it? So we actually spend $335.5 billion on the World War One, and the government will raise about a third of that through what's called an income tax and sin taxes. The rest was raised through war bonds sold to the public, Liberty loans and Victory loans, that sort of thing. All right. So here's a propaganda poster saying, "You buy a Liberty bond, lest I perish." All right, so propaganda is going to become very popular. It popularizes the war. The government sets up the nation's first propaganda agency. It's called the Committee on Public Information, or the CPI. And George Creel becomes the leader of that agency. And he's able to persuade many of the nation's artists to create thousands of paintings, posters, cartoons, and lots of sculptures to help promote the war effort. Okay? He's probably paying them to do it too. Um, anyway, a wonderful opportunity for you, the United States Navy. Here's one. Eat more cottage cheese. 1 pound supplies more protein than all of these. You'll need less meat. Kind of interesting. Corn, the food of the nation, served some way every meal. Appetizing, nourishing, economical. This way you can use cornmeal to bake, cornbread muffins, pancakes, and other things. So this way they could help reduce the amount of flour by using cornmeal. Uncle Sam, the lid's down. This is on the family sugar bowl. Obey orders. So this has to do with the reduction of sugar during the war effort. Help Uncle Sam stamp out the Kaiser. Buy U.S. government bonds. This is another Liberty bond. So I like this one. Which do you support? The Germans on the right or the Americans on the left? So that's a statement right there. Little Americans, do your bit. Eat oatmeal, cornmeal, mush, hominy, other corn cereals, and rice with milk. Save the wheat for our soldiers. So another thing about cereal, I don't know if you know this, but cereal was invented by a psychiatrist who was trying to treat his patients, and he was trying to find a way for them to eat more fiber and oats. And so he found that if you break the oats up into milk, then it was easier for people to eat. And that trend caught on, and now it's everyone loves cereal. I love cereal. You ever had Cinnamon Toast Crunch? Holy crap, that is good. Be patriotic. Sign your country's pledge to save the food. I like that one. Help them. Keep your war savings pledge. So this is a stamp thing. By buying stamps, you're helping the war effort. Also like the imagery of the stamps as machine guns firing. That's cool. Save your child from autocracy and poverty. Buy a war savings stamp. Invest in the Victory Liberty Loan. They kept the sea lanes open. This is a callback to the unrestricted submarine warfare from like the sinking of the Lusitania and other ships. Hun or home? Buy more Liberty bonds. So it's like saying, you want the Huns to come, or do you want them to come, or do you want your men to come home? You decide. So buy Liberty bonds. Beat back the Hun with Liberty bonds. Here's another one. Remember, the Hun is one of the nicknames for the German soldiers. Alright, let's talk about attack on civil liberties. As the war continued, we're going to see civil liberties become compromised, and anti-immigrant feelings will become very strong, especially towards anti-German and Austrian-Hungarian people. So we see the passage of the Espionage and Sedition Acts, which prevents anti-war protest. But the problem with this is that it goes against the spirit of the First Amendment, which is free speech. And we're also going to see socialist and labor leaders are targeted during the war. We're also going to see a social change during the war. Probably the greatest effect of the First World War for African Americans is that it accelerates the Great Migration. And the Great Migration, I think we talked about before, but if not, this is a large-scale movement of people from the South to the North to find jobs. They're trying to escape discrimination from Jim Crow laws and to find more job opportunities. And so some of these destinations are Chicago, New York, and Philadelphia. But yet, despite that, we're going to see one of the worst race riots in history is in Chicago of 1919. Women are also going to play an important part in the war. While the men are all fighting who's going to work at the factory, the women have to go in and replace them. And many of them are going to have to take on jobs previously held by women. They become railroad workers, cooks, dock workers, factory workers, and miners. Many of these women would serve in volunteer organizations, such as the Red Cross. It also hastened the passage of the 19th Amendment, which gave the woman the right to vote. Okay? And so the symbol of women's war contributions was Rosie the Riveter, which we'll see her again in World War II as well. And the funny thing is that although when men come home from the war, women they're expected to go back home, but they have better treatment in society. So they say, oh well, the men have to go back to work, but but at least you get the right to vote. By the time World War II comes around, after the war, women are going to be working. Every woman's going to be working that's not married, and many of them will still be working. All right, another unfortunate consequence is the flu pandemic. And this happened in the fall of 1918 when the United States suffered a home front crisis when the flu epidemic affected 25% of the population. The mines shut down, telephone service was cut in half, factory work was delayed, and cities began running short on coffins, while corpses will become lay unburied for as long as a week. 500,000 people will be killed from it in the U.S. before it disappears in 1919. And then worldwide, the epidemic will kill 30 million people. So it's considered the Great Influenza. They even wore masks back then too, which is kind of interesting in our current climate how things are. So There's a great documentary that PBS did years ago called Influenza 1918. Okay, and I believe that is it. If you have any questions about this lecture, please message me and I will get to you as soon as I can.